Hi, this is Renée Marino, and you are listening to Awakened Nation with Brad Zales.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Zales, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Hey, everybody. I have a great guest on today, Renée Marino. Hi, Renée.
Hi, Brad. So happy to be here.
Where are you? It looks like you're on the set of a really cool show, a sitcom.
Yeah. This is not a virtual background, by the way. This is my wall.
Wait a minute.
It's my wall. It's my wall.
You can touch it.
Brad, it's funny because I teach a course called Connecting on Camera, where I help entrepreneurs, business owners to be able to get on camera and be themselves with confidence. And my advice is to not use a virtual background. And some people are like, isn't that one? I'm like, nope, this is not a virtual background. This is real.
Well, it's gotten so bad that everybody thinks it's virtual now when you have a real background. I actually have a friend who he has like a fireplace and shelves for his books, and he took that straight on and he puts that in his virtual background. Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is real behind me. Okay. This is, I grabbed my toys. I
love it. I saw the jiu-jitsu. So I figured that was real.
Yes. Kempo jiu-jitsu, which is a nasty MMA style martial art. So I loved it. It's fun stuff. So we have a lot of friends in common. We have a lot to talk about today. First of all, we have to thank Randall Kenneth Jones from The Jones Show, good friend of mine. We do a lot of swapping of guests and stuff, and he'll call me up, on a Tuesday night, usually because the following day he does the Clubhouse, and we just chat and we talk. And he says, "Hey, you got to get Renée on the show." And I'm like, okay, who's Renée? Looking at your bio and everything, I'm very excited. Also, we have a common friend, which is Justin Shank. How was that? You were on his podcast recently, the Growth Now movement.
Yes, just 2 days ago, which is I have both of you guys in the same week. How lucky am I? And that was my first time meeting Justin. We also met through a mutual friend. And after he and I spoke, I just said, Justin, you're amazing. You are so great, right? You can sense someone's energy and you can sense when they're genuine. And for me, Brad, I say this a lot. I value nothing more in life than truly genuine people. And that's how I felt after he and I spoke. I was like, yep, you're going to be a friend.
We've had Justin on the show twice, and the funniest thing is I was doing a keynote speech in Reading, Pennsylvania, for Burke County. They have a business get together. Tom Newmaster hired me, so I'm in the lobby and I'm telling everybody, "Hey, I'm doing a keynote tomorrow." I'm doing the social media nerd stuff that we all do. And my friend Dove Barron reached out to me. He goes, "Hey, mate, you're in Pennsylvania. You got to meet my mate Justin Shank." So I start texting Justin. He meets me at the hotel. We sit at the bar, and the same experience you had. Here's this humble guy, reluctant entrepreneur. We even talked about spirituality, the death of his mother, and how she was a huge influence on creating, what he has created. He's become, I don't know if he's a multimillionaire, but I do know he's hit millions with the Growth Now movement and the Growth Now movement podcast. And he's one of the most humblest people I've ever met. And he reaches out to the super famous, podcasters and just hobnobs with these people. And it's just wonderful to hear people like that. And I agree with you. Authenticity is number one.
It's number one for sure.
Number one. So we're going to dig into the show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening in, get some paper and a pen or a pencil. Or take digital notes. I don't care. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to introduce Renée. You okay with that, Renée?
Absolutely.
Renée Marino is a professional communications coach, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author, named by Yahoo Finance as one of the top 10 communication coaches to follow in 2021. Renée helps business professionals effectively communicate with confidence through simple and easy tools. We're going to talk about that today. Her best-selling book, Becoming a Master Communicator, is a powerful guide for those struggling to have clear and honest communication in a world driven by digital technology. Renée is the female lead role, Mary Delgado, in the movie Jersey Boys, directed by Clint Eastwood, and has graced the Broadway stage in many musicals. You're awesome already. Renée was the co-host of Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi's World Summit. Renée Marino, welcome to the show.
Woohoo! Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
We have a lot to dig in and talk about. First of all, I am a big fan of like discommunication, and I wrote my first book, Liquid Leadership, because I was frustrated as a kid that my dad didn't understand the generational shifts that were taking place. I've also been on stage many, many times as I've done acting, but I was a stand-up comedian. We had Lori Palmentary on the show last week. She's a writer and a stand-up comedian for Gutfeld. And let's dig in. What got you started in like communication is the thing? Like, what happened? Was it a childhood trauma? Was it you're trying to talk to somebody and they wouldn't listen? What was it that got you started?
Brad, since I was a little girl, I grew up in an Italian-American family. So you can often find us, around the kitchen table, eating. Eating is my number one love. Eating, laughing, sometimes arguing, but nonetheless communicating. Yeah. And if there was something wrong and I was upset one day, my parents would always right away come up to me and say, Renée, what's the matter? Let's talk about it. And I never realized how valuable these words were until I got out into the real world and I saw that not every family communicated in the way I did. And I was obsessed with how people communicated and why they did in the way they did. And that kind of stayed with me my entire life as a professional performer for decades, as you said, on Broadway and TV and film. And then in 2013, I had the honor of playing the role of Frankie Valli's wife, Mary Delgado, in Jersey Boys on Broadway. Mm-hmm. And one Sunday matinee, I'm on the stage with the girls singing, my boyfriend's back and you're gonna be in trouble. Hey la, my boyfriend's back. And I look in the audience and staring at me from 10 rows back was the legend himself, Clint Eastwood. We got word that they were going to be doing a film version of Jersey Boys and Clint was going to be the director. Truth be told. Yep. Like many of you, I discounted myself immediately. I thought to myself, they're going to hire A-list celebrities out of Los Angeles. Marissa Tomei is going to play my role. Right. Whatever. And I didn't think much about it until they started calling people in from our cast to audition. And they were looking for a Mary, the role I was playing. And at that point, I called my agent and I said, listen, I'd love to just get an appointment to be able to audition for the role of Mary. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the acting world, an audition is simply an interview. Be able to get interviewed to play this role in the film. Weeks go by. My agent tries and calls me one day and she says, Renée, I'm sorry. I don't know what the problem is. They won't see you for the role of Mary, but they said they'll give you an audition for one of the smaller roles, one of the angels who sings My Boyfriend's Back. And at this moment, Brad, I remember hanging up the phone and feeling my feelings. And step one of being able to become a master communicator is having that communication with yourself. And that means feeling your feelings. And I let the tears go and I got frustrated and I screamed a little bit while I was by myself in the house. And a half hour later, I threw my hands up physically and spiritually. And I said, Renée, what are you going to do? You tried everything. You're going to go in and audition for an angel. I'm in the room that day with the casting director at the audition. And he says, Renée, would you like to sing the song first or read the scene? And at that moment, I heard this quiet little voice within me say, you have to do this. It feels too right. And before I was even consciously aware, I look at the casting director in the eyes and I say, you know, Jeff, I was really hoping to come in and read for the role of Mary Delgado. And he looks at me and he goes, I was just thinking the same thing. And I was like, amazing. Okay, great. I do the audition that day and I leave there, Brad, feeling so grateful because I got the chance. That's all I wanted.
Yeah.
So weeks go by. I'm at my childhood home in New Jersey, down the street from where the whole storyline takes place. And my agent calls me and says, you're Mary Delgado in the movie. Clint Eastwood loves you. And I was like, like it was the most surreal moment of my life. Cut to first day of filming. Now, let me remind you, I've never been on a film set before. TV, I had always done Broadway, musical theater, and it's completely different than film.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I was very nervous. The butterflies are flying around in my stomach. But again, I heard that quiet voice within say, Renee, you know what you're doing. Clint Eastwood hired you. Trust in your talent and leap. And I walk through the doors and everyone says, Renee, welcome. And up to my right side walks Clint. And he says, I went around to all the different casts, but nobody was in your class. And then you came in and put yourself on tape and it was the icing on the cake. And I'm like holding back the tears. I haven't filmed yet. And that first day, Brad, and every day that followed, I would sit and eat lunch with Clint Eastwood and I would pick his brain like a sponge. Clint, what was it like when you started acting? Clint, what did that camera shot mean that you said today? Clint, when you were brought up in blah, blah, blah. I mean, anything I could, because for me, I knew I was in the presence of greatness and I wanted to absorb it for all I could. A month into the film, I'm eating lunch once again. I told you guys I love to eat more than anything.
Manja.
Right? And I'm with Clint and the producer of the film, and they're talking about how Clint knew he wanted me for the role when he saw me on Broadway. And I put my fork down and I said, do you guys want to hear a funny story? I never had an appointment for the role of Mary. The only reason I got to read the scenes is because I opened up my big mouth in the room and asked. And the two of them look at each other and they go, what do you mean? We requested you. We said we want the girl from the Broadway show to come in and audition. And I came to find out that day that there was a middle person, casting associate, juggling a few films at once and just dropped the ball. And the reason, Brad, I told you that whole story is because nothing signifies more powerfully the power of communication. And because of my ability to speak up and communicate in that room that day, I gained a once in a lifetime opportunity. And think about that for yourself. How many times have you let an opportunity pass you by because of a fear of speaking up or a miscommunication through a text or email, or just not knowing what to say or how to say it?
That's powerful. What a story. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can just see Clint Eastwood like sitting there going, she's perfect. I like her. She's going to be the one, because I grew up with Clint Eastwood. He's like the man,
The man.
I also, there's something else that I want those of you who are listening who might be a little younger. There is a generational divide where we have one, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's just that one generation has been taught to enter a room and believe they're equal to someone my age who has over 45 years of professional experience. And I'm listening to your story and you listened to your intuition. You knew what your skill level was, but you also humbled yourself before the right people and started asking questions. Yes. And that is a powerful, powerful skill, because I don't know if anybody has read this, but a few years ago, they did a study, I think it was last year. They found out that soft skills were what made people successful. Yes, of course, you went to college or you had some training or you have the ability to do this particular job, but people rose in the ranks because of soft skills, and you are handling that one soft skill that so many people ignore. And it's two parts, and I want you to talk about this. First, you created an inner dialogue with yourself, and that opened the door for you to follow your intuition better. So let's talk about that a little bit, because this is a masterclass in this as far as I'm concerned. So go ahead, Renee.
Brad, the first step of what I use, which is my connect method, is communication with self. And the way we communicate with ourselves sets the foundation, the framework for all of our external communications. And nowadays, in this digital landscape we're living in, we have so many different outlets of communication that are all amazing and convenient and make being able to reach out to one another convenient. But what I'm seeing is that we're choosing convenience over connection. And it starts with us choosing that convenience, even when it comes to ourselves. We wake up in the morning, open our eyes, and oftentimes the first thing we do is we roll over, grab our smartphone, start scrolling, or we hop right into email and text. And before we know it, our brain is already activated. And then we wonder why we move about the world. We get in conversations, we feel frazzled, we have short temper, we feel brain fog. It's because we haven't taken the first moments of our day to connect within first. And when we do that, and here's a simple practice for all of you right here and now. When you wake up in the morning, instead of grabbing the smartphone, leave that digital device aside, go to the bathroom, come back to your quiet space, take 5 to 10 minutes, and ask yourself this one question: how am I feeling? And then get a piece of paper and a pen, not typing it on your notes app, not on your computer, but physical pen to paper, and allow yourself to write the answer. Why do I say physical pen to paper? Because research shows that when we write, we activate more parts of the brain. And cognitive scientist Daniel Willingham has noted that students remember what they think about. And I love this because when you think about writing, we are thinking about formulating the letter that formulates the word, that formulates the sentence. So even without being aware of it, what we're writing is absorbing in our brain. So ask yourself, how am I feeling? And then take 5 to 10 minutes and write. And this invokes stream of consciousness, which allows you to connect with your subconscious mind, which is full of tons of thoughts and feelings and emotions that we push aside, pulls it into our conscious brain through our hand and onto the page. And it's this beautiful mental dump that I like to say that gets things out on the page that you can then look back and read after you're done writing. And you go, oh, I thought I was over that argument with my friend, but I guess I'm not because I'm still writing about it. And this gets you clear on what's going on within. So then you're starting your place from a space of alignment. And then when it's time to connect with others, you're more grounded, you're more focused because you have clarity around who you are and what's going on within.
You said a mouthful there. I have it's a report that I put out, and it's 7 steps to turning your life around and, building, getting ahead basically. And I put in there my experiences, and that morning routine is the first thing I start with. And number one, I tell people, you're watching these coaches who are going for hard runs in the morning and yoga, and they're drinking their bulletproof coffee, and then they're meditating, and they're crushing it. Well, and I say, hey, whoa, relax. You have to figure out the morning routine that works best for you. And the number one thing is to reconnect to yourself, because you've just spent all this time in the dream world. You come back down, boom, and you just take off. So everything from that moment on is subjective. It's being influenced, or it's objective. It's being influenced by the outside world instead of subjective, which is when you reconnect and you set up a strategy for the day. And instead of thinking, I like this word better, reflect.
Yeah.
Contemplation, reflection. Those are powerful words. Oh my goodness. But you really, because I know Italians have to talk with their hands. So that must be hard in the morning. Hey. This is funny. I mean, it's powerful work. And here's what I find, lovingly admiring in you. And that is this, here is somebody who knows how to emote on stage, how to sing, how to transfer what's going on in the heart to an audience. You're reading someone else's words and saying them as if they're your own. And now you've taken this to a whole other level of communication. It's not just visual and emoting and auditory, it's reflection and all this. And it's just a beautiful combination of bringing all your skills together, if I can say that.
Thank you. And I just actually did another podcast recently, the Self-Helpful podcast with Kevin Miller. And we were talking about this whole idea about transferring of gifts. And the reason that came up is because what I explained was, after I did the Jersey Boys movie, I was living in LA for a while. I did my first television show, commercials, wrote my one-woman show, and then I was ready. I was missing the Broadway community. So my husband and I moved back to New Jersey, and I started doing Pretty Woman on Broadway. That was my most recent Broadway show. Yeah.
Nice.
And while I was doing that show, that's when I started writing my book, which is Becoming a Master Communicator. So I was doing 8 shows a week, in between dance numbers, going into the crew guy's room, writing my book. And when the show closed, I knew that I was ready. And this is what I said to Kevin on the podcast. I said, I knew that I was ready to activate my other gifts of writing, of coaching, of speaking. And I was like, I don't know the first thing, the first step to make that happen, but I know that I'm ready for this new chapter. And it was so beautiful the way you put it. You said it wasn't even that you activated those gifts, because like you just said, Brad, I already had this element of communication as an actress. I mean, it's all about communication, connecting with the fans, connecting with the audience. But now it was transferring that gift into this new space of being an entrepreneur, a speaker, a coach. So I love that you brought that up. And I want to touch upon one other thing that we brought up. In the room that day, when I spoke up, I explained to you that I heard the quiet voice of my soul. Now, the only reason I was able to hear that voice is because of my strong communication with self. Because once you start to wake up every day and connect and reflect upon yourself, you start to tune in, tap into that quiet voice that's always there, by the way. It's always there, sitting there confidently, not trying to compete with that loud voice that's the voice of judgment or criticism, the voice that's trying to protect you. That quiet voice is always there as your inner compass. And when you listen to it, it always guides you exactly where you need to go. So that's why it is worth every amount of time that you have to connect with yourself, because that is what allows every other aspect of your life and your relationships to flourish.
Yeah, it's that inner nudge, and if you don't create a relationship with yourself, you're going to miss a lot of these inner nudges, these little communications that take place. I forget who the doctor was, Dr. Polis or something like that. He had found out that when we are in conscious thought, our brain is firing 2,000 neurons a minute or whatever, a second. But our subconscious, they measured, is firing off like 2 to 4 billion neurons per second. So who's really in charge? And this is, I've heard this from, masters from the Far East, but soul thinks and understands through perception, which is feeling and knowingness and things like that. So what we're really doing is making that deeper connection, making that connection to our, let's call it, higher self. Yes. Wouldn't you say that's true?
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. However you want to label it. Maybe you call it your gut instincts. Maybe you call it your intuition. I call it the quiet voice of my soul. Whichever label we want to use, at the end of the day, it's the truest part of us. It's our soul, right? Yeah. It's underneath all the layers of conditioning, of patterns, of growing up in a family that told us that you should be this, you should be that. It's the part that knows. And when we start to operate from there, man, it's like we walk into the room and we just say the right thing at the right time. We make that right decision. We connect with people in an effortless way. It's because we're tuning in, tapping in, baby, to that powerhouse. And that's why, our digital devices are such a gift. And this is why I wrote the book. This is the reason I wrote the book, Brad, because
hold it up.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Hold it up.
I'm holding it up. Oh, yeah. Here we go.
There you go. Hey, I love that cover.
Look who's on the cover with me.
Yeah. You love green, obviously.
Mr. Clint Eastwood.
You have green on and then the green book. That's a fantastic cover. Usually when authors put out their first cover, they don't put themselves on the cover, but you're already famous. So I love it.
My publishers and I sat down, and that was the consensus. We had a mastermind about everything. What's the cover going to be? And we all agreed. They were like, no, it'll be great to have your photo. And then when Mr. Clint Eastwood allowed me to have his endorsement on the cover with me, I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
That is a wow moment.
Yeah, it was a wow moment.
That's fantastic. I mean, everybody, please go out and pick up the book because it's it's eye-opening, the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I want to say this in the Bible. It says, "Close your eyes, look to the north, the south, the east, and the west. That's your domain." And they're basically, I think it's Abraham. They were talking to him about this, and make that connection. This is your domain when you close your eyes. The whole inside. So it's meditate upon the Lord, as they say, and not to get all Christian and spiritual, but we are given clues, ladies and gentlemen, throughout our entire life on what to do and how to do it. And if you notice, from kindergarten to high school, they don't teach you any success principles. And it seems like, I was the drummer in high school and the artist, and I got pretty much great grades and everything else, but I was not the math guy. And now here it is. How many years later, we start to realize that those people who are in drama class are the ones who get into that touchy-feely, being able to communicate better than everybody else, and a passion for communicating. That's the other thing. Let me ask you this. What kind of clients do you work with, number one? And number two, how hard was it to get them to understand that communication is everything?
This is a problem that I believe we all know exists, but everyone's just like accepting it. Yeah. Communication. Yeah. It's such a problem. Oh, what are you going to do? Everybody's on their smartphones nowadays. Nothing you can do. And I'm like, no, we can do something. And that's my mission, is to create a communication movement of people who learn to prioritize communication in their lives through these simple and easy tools. Because I believe this, I know this to be true, Brad. Everything in our lives starts with communication. And when we learn to master this skill, we become limitless. And what's wonderful about what I've been able to do is, when I speak on incredible platforms like yours, and I connect with people from stages when I'm speaking about communication, it's always this same reaction of like the head nod and like, yeah, that happens to me. Yeah, I had that miscommunication through an email. And yeah, it's this recognition. So it's this beautiful witnessing of people who in their gut know that they struggle with communication, but it's not until it was said, maybe through something that I taught them, that they're like, oh, wow, I do that. Because this is what I often say. Communication is like breathing. And think about breathing. We don't often think about how we're breathing unless something's going wrong, right? We're having an anxiety attack. We're feeling panic. Right. And all of a sudden it's like, I can't breathe. And we're breathing really shallow. The same thing happens with communication. We don't think about how we're communicating or connecting with people until something goes awry in a relationship, until all of a sudden we haven't talked to our best friend for 5 years, or you're fighting with your coworker. And then it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And then maybe there's an awareness. So I want to help people to create that awareness before there are any problems, right? And elevate in their lives and businesses before that happens.
I want to ask you this, because this is funny. We seem to be simpatico, because every time I'm about to ask a question, you actually bring it up, and I'm laughing at this. My girlfriend and I were watching a television show that was a bunch of lawyers in New York. And I sat there and they were all conniving against each other and they were all trying to get at each other and all this. And I said, in the real world, people aren't like that. But then I had to stop myself and I realized we have a whole generation that was raised on 90210, which was written by 40-year-olds trying to, make teenagers who don't have the skills yet to understand and emote and talk a certain way. So we have a generation that's been raised on this deep dialogue since they were children. And so sometimes we get a lot of, how can I say, communication mistakes stuck in our, their habits, bad habits. Mm-hmm. And I think relationships are where you're tested the most, because those things will come out. Are you someone who likes to deflect? Are you someone who lashes out? Or just how do you deal with people like that? What do you help them do to, besides count to 10, or is that a strategy?
What I teach and communication is so broad, right? I mean, there are a million communication coaches out there. Some are teaching you exactly how to present your body language so you appear confident, or some people are helping you with the exact right words to say. What I focus on is the communication of connection. How do I communicate to connect with people in a genuine way? Because when those connections are made, that's what creates impact and income and all the things you want in your life. So what I help mostly right now, who I work with, are business professionals. I speak to a lot of companies. I also have one-on-one coaching. So I work with a lot of other coaches, entrepreneurs, and I help them to understand that at the core, it's about connecting. It's not about perfection. It's about connection. And how do we do that? We do that through the 7 steps that I'll run through. My Connect method: communication with self, owning who you are, nailing down your information. So when you have a meeting or you're connecting with a person for the first time, have the information about the space you're entering, right? Maybe you're going to a conference and you're going to be meeting people who are all podcasters. Great. Gain some information about that so you have it in your back pocket, because that's how you connect with someone else. The next step is in next level storytelling, understanding that, especially in business connections, instead of leading with, I, me, and I did this and that, how about start with a story? Kind of how I did with you here today. And I shared my story of being a part of the Jersey Boys film and what that brought. When you start to share through story, people find themselves in your story. So that's the next step. After that, what my favorite, energize through movement. And some of you may be saying, what the heck does that have to do with communication? Everything.
Yeah.
If we are not moving our bodies, we are keeping energy stuck and stagnant. And that energy holds us back from being able to really listen to a person when they're speaking. It holds us back from catching commonalities that we can reflect back to let people know that we're listening. So moving your body before any interaction. The next step is being a complete listener. And that means listening to hear, not just to respond, giving that person the space and grace to have an open platform to be heard. And the last part is talk from the heart. Talk from the heart and understand that nobody is impressed by what you perceive as perfection. People are impressed with relatability, authenticity, vulnerability. So at the end of the day, if you flub all your words when you go live on that video, or you go off on a tangent in that conversation, people forgive anything and everything when they have connected with you. So as long as you can implement those 7 things into your life. And again, these are simple things we can do starting right now. When you start to become conscious of those things, trust me, you are going to start to connect with people on the next level. And as Simon Sinek says, Brad, we don't do business with companies. We do business with people.
Yes.
And, people, when they connect with you, they know you, they like you, they trust you, they want to work with you, and they want you to be in their circle.
People come first. Wow, you said a mouthful there. It's very, it blows my mind that they still teach at these business schools that you can just get rid of a person and replace them, at the bottom, and that the genius is at the top. It's the CEO who's the genius. And we're finding more and more that is not true. And I love what Harley Davidson did. When they got bought out from AMF a long time ago, they basically reformed the company, and they gave the frontline employees all the power they needed to shut the line down if they felt a product or a weld was inferior. And they were encouraged to communicate without being chastised. And that is what I call the environment for innovation. Yes. And as you can see, their brand came back. It came back with a mighty roar because it's an American brand. And do you see that in a lot of times? Because we have been raised in the corporate environment that we have to put our head down and work in perfection. And we found that the best people that rise to the top are master communicators. Yes. Am I right?
1,000,000%, Brad. And when I was doing the Jersey Boys film, one of the greatest experiences was just being able to be directed by Clint Eastwood. And many people assume, oh, it's because he's an Oscar-winning director, actor. I'm like, no, that had nothing to do with it. Right. I watched this man, again, who is a legend, and I expected and assumed, that dangerous word that we all utilize, I assumed I was going to walk in and he was going to be like, all right, Renee, I need you to go to that spot, say this with this emotion and micromanage. And it was the opposite. He gave the actors all of the freedom in the world, to the point that we did some scenes, he let us improv for 10 minutes. And what that did was, because of his trust in me, that activated the trust within myself. And as a result, I was able to deliver in a way that was more impactful than I ever could have done if he was micromanaging me. And that's because the best leaders lead by being and not by telling, right? And being a master communicator isn't pointing the finger, Brad, you did this wrong. You have to do this. Go here, go here. No. The master communicators are the ones who are complete listeners. They are the ones who understand it's not about perfection. It's about working to your best at that moment. And if you need help, asking for the help. Understanding that it's about owning who you are. And that means if your zone of genius is in this area, we want you to stay in that lane. We don't want you to try to do everything and anything. Stay in your zone of genius and then call upon those other people to be in the other zone of geniuses. And now we have this beautiful collaborative atmosphere. The best leaders lead by being and not by telling. And communication is at the core of that. And I'm so passionate about this because when I speak to companies and, these huge, very successful companies, it's shocking to me sometimes that I'm saying something that they weren't aware of, which is in everything I just shared in the Connect method, understanding that it's much simpler than we think. And we get so caught up in tactics and thinking, I need this computer program and this. And it's like, wait, before all that, at the core is communication.
And once again, you said a mouthful. I don't know what to say. It is funny how you can think you're communicating, and yet half the room doesn't know what you just said. Isn't that astounding? I mean, my first comedy coach was also a business coach, Tim Davis. And he told me this incredible story that I started rolling laughing because Tim was a stand-up comedian for many, many years, and he blew his shot at the Carson show and wound up driving taxi cab and, working odd jobs for the rest of his life. He had that shot, but his internal dialogue, and he talks about this, made him doubt himself. And so here he is years later, and he starts telling me this story. He's like, I get called to speak at Stanford, and he's like almost 7 feet tall. And he's got this thick New York accent, and he goes, I don't have a degree. Why are they asking me to, speak? And he's giving classes at Stanford. He's spoken all over. So he had to go in front of this room filled with PhDs who were trying to write and help and do all these systems for pregnant teen mothers. And so he's backstage, and the meeting planner comes up to him and he goes, why am I here again? And she goes, because you need to get these GD PhDs to stop, speaking up here and start understanding who they're writing and helping.
Yes.
And so Tim went out on stage. First thing he said, he goes, you're the smartest people in this room. He goes, but you're using PhD language to teenagers. who
Yes.
just had a kid and probably had to drop out of high school. Do you think there's a disconnect? And that's when they sat there and went, oh, because their attitude was, I'm super intelligent. You need to come up to my level of communication, which is arrogance.
Yes.
And instead, they started to learn how to come down and pull those people up.
Yeah.
And it's that simple.
It's seeking to understand and not be understood. And we are in this culture of a lot of talking, right? Everybody talks over each other, talks at each other, but never talks with each other. And that's again where I go back to complete listening. If these PhD individuals were listening to these kids, if they were hearing the language they were using, if they were hearing their struggles, they would know to meet them at their level. So then those kids could hear what those PhD individuals were saying. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems we see in society now. No one's listening to one another. And because of the social media comparison culture and highlight reels, we think we have to show how smart we are. And oh my gosh, and I've done all this and I did here and I traveled there. And it's like, hold on. Why don't we first say, Brad, tell me about yourself? Whoa. That's like foreign to some people because we have conditioned ourselves to believe that we have to prove how smart we are. We have to prove how great we are. And in my days of being a performer, it would always make me laugh because this has always been innately who I am. I own up to my mistakes. When I am a hot mess, I'm like, all right, well, that was a hot mess, right? And I would be in these auditions and in dance auditions. I mean, you're in a room, so you're watching all these other girls who are your same height, look like you, audition. Yeah. And I could tell that like, so many of them believed in this idea of like, okay, I have to like put the front on, like I'm perfect and everything's great. And if they'd make a mistake, like they tried to play it off. And if I made a mistake, I'd be like, oh, there I went, made a mistake. And I remember always thinking like, why are we putting on this facade? Yeah. And if we can learn to remove the mask, so to speak, and lead with our authenticity, man, it makes everything so much simpler. And when our defenses go down, the people who are around us, their defenses go down. And then it's like, this is refreshing. Yeah, Brad, let's just have a real damn conversation, right? Enough of this BS.
I've actually had people call me up after a show and they're like, how long have you known that person? I said, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, how do you do that? And it's like, that's innate in me. Yeah. That's something that I got from my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom. They were really great at finding that one person who was sitting alone in a restaurant and said, hey, why don't you join us? Yeah. And having these great conversations and not being afraid of that. There's nothing more hysterical to me than when you enter an elevator in New York City and no one can talk to each other. They're all looking away and they got their, their arms in front of their groin, and they started putting televisions inside the elevator because they knew people were not communicating. So I love to get on the elevator and face everybody. And I look around, I look everybody in the eye and I go, all right, I've called this meeting this morning because you, Johnson, you won the sales award. And they all start laughing, and then I turn back around and I go, come on, people.
Yeah.
Get this thing started,
It's beautiful. Small talk. It's a lost art. I talk about that in the book in chapter 2, man. Small talk. I love small talk. And nowadays you go sit in the doctor's office waiting room, and I'm used to sitting down and smiling and saying hello. And often I get the reaction where someone looks up from their phone. They look at me as if I asked them for $500, and then they go back to their head in the phone. And I'm thinking, what the heck? I just said hello, right?
I know.
Like, gone are the days where you started a conversation with a person and they ended up becoming your best friend, or the person you fell in love with, or a friend of the family. I mean, we don't know the opportunities we are denying ourselves by being glued to these little devices in our hands.
I always find it interesting when I meet an introvert or somebody who is petrified to do that. And I'm gonna share something with everybody. People who listen to the show know this about me. I was deathly shy as a child. And I mean deathly shy. Hide behind my parents, all that. And my father, being a Hungarian immigrant, immigrant family, he didn't care about my feelings. Let's put it this way. We survived, communist Hungary, shut up and sit down. So my dad made me go out and sit down. He says a new kid moved in across the lane, and he said, I want you to sit there and I want you to say hello to him. And you do not come into this house until you say something to him. I sat there for an hour and I was petrified, and a storm was coming. My dad knew a storm was coming. And after an hour, I said to the kid, hi. And that kid stared at me, and he did the same thing. And he went, hi. And I got up and I ran back inside the house, and I went up to my room. And my father didn't lecture me. I didn't have a television in my bedroom or any of that stuff or any video games. This is way before that. This is the 60s. Hello. Yes, I am that old. And I'm sitting there, and I remember that feeling, that horrible feeling in my gut of wanting to say hello, but not being able to. And from that moment on, and my dad is a genius, I refused to be like that. I would just start saying hi to people. Hello. I worked on my elocution. You can't hear my accent unless I get mad. And I say, I got that Pennsylvania accent, but what was the transformative moment for you? Were you a shy kid, or did you always wanted to entertain? You were a big ham at age 3, right?
Yeah, I was. It was for me. I was always the outgoing one. A lot of people have asked me, like, when was the moment you knew that Broadway was your dream as a little girl? Yeah. Like this sunlight came down. And I said, it's funny. It just was always a part of who I was. Like at my friends' birthday parties, I'm always the one dancing in the middle of the circle, right? So it was something that was innately natural for me. Communicating, right. Being in the book I have, and I actually have a free resource for your audience, but it's all about how to identify your communication home. And your communication home is your most natural way of communicating. And it's a really great read for you in the book and to download this free resource, because it gives you a really strong starting point of understanding what your go-to communication style is. And for me, it was direct verbal interaction. So if you're my best friend, Brad, and I've sensed something's wrong, I'm the first one to be like, okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Now, as I shared before, I had to understand, Renee, not everyone's like you. So when I got to college, and my roommate, who was very quiet, when something was upsetting her, and I would say, hey, are you okay? And I realized she closed off. I had to learn, Renee, your communication style isn't everyone's style. So you must learn the other styles, how to sit back, how to be more of a listener. So I had to develop that for myself. But yes, as a child, it was fairly natural for me to be like the one, talking with my hands, energetic, dancing all over the place. But I had to learn the opposite, right? I had to learn take the power of the pause.
Tone it down.
Tone it down, Renee.
When I was little, my grandparents, I wasn't self-conscious when I was really little. So my grandparents, my grandfather especially, he played drums in the big band era, and he was an entertainer, and he owned his own restaurant. And my mother sang and played piano. So how do you get attention in a house like that?
Yeah.
So I learned to do impersonations, and I came out. Evidently, my mom tells me this story. I think I was 3 or 4. They had this big cocktail party, and I ran out naked, and I went, yabba dabba doo. And I ran back, and everybody rolled hilariously and got my first laugh. It was my first big one.
Yes.
But when I got to a certain age, I hid behind the drum set. And I always had this ability to speak. And I was doing radio in high school. I did the morning announcements. I also was playing drums, and I was in art class and all this. So I was always outgoing after I got over my shyness. But I too had to take it down a notch, because I've learned through the years, and we can talk a little bit about this, because there seems to be an emphasis nowadays on the introvert, extrovert kind of thing. And I feel like as an extrovert, I'm more concerned about the other person and communicating with them, and I'm giving and I'm supporting. I'm creating space for them to lose their temper or cry even. But I find with introverts, they get tired of that, and they pull inward a lot. Like it's almost like they face themselves more. They don't get their energy from just being the outside sources and the jazz of being able to talk to somebody new.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be more, I mean, they're introverted, but they seem to be more reflective in on themselves and self-conscious of their communication or lack thereof.
Yeah. It all comes down to that when you are self-aware, like Brad and I here are talking about, okay, we're both pretty much extroverts. We've had to learn the ability to invoke some of the introvert. Did I say that? We're extroverts. Yeah. So we had to learn to invoke, let's just say, some of those introvert qualities where we do sit back a little bit more. You can only connect with a person and meet them where they're at if you first have self-awareness around you. For example, if I wasn't aware that sometimes my energy may off-put people, if I'm not aware of that, I'm going to go into every room and just be talking and blah, 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 and high energy. And I'm not going to have that sense of observing the other person who's withdrawing. So it all goes back to communication with self first. And then when you have that understanding of your most natural way of communicating, then you can be aware when another person is reacting. So for example, if you're speaking with an introvert and you're maybe saying, hey, well, what's going on? I'd love to hear more. And you feel them withdraw a little bit. That's your sure sign to say, okay, and you don't need to talk about it. That's totally cool. I just wanted to ask you, right? And then you know how to take the conversation down a different path because you're aware that this is making them a bit uncomfortable. You know, I see it all the time. And I just spoke to someone recently, and it was so interesting because we hopped on a quick phone call and I made it really clear. I said, I only have 5 minutes because I'm going to get my hair cut, but I just wanted to pick up and make sure everything was okay. And this person kept going on, and it was on and on about not the thing that we needed to talk about. It was about extraneous details and all of that. And it really made me think like, wow, that's so interesting to me that they didn't sense. I prefaced the conversation with, I only have 5 minutes. I'm walking out the door, but I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. What's going on? And even that didn't give them the awareness to say, oh, you know what? I'm talking about when I was 5 in middle school, and she just told me that she's on her way out, right? And that's probably because there's a lack of self-awareness of not sitting back to reflect on themselves and say, wait, what happens? Like when I speak to individuals, what is the common reaction I get? Do people walk away? Do people say, oh, whoa, sorry, I gotta go? Because when you start to understand reactions, then you could say, okay, now does this have to do with me or doesn't it? And it's just nice to be able to reflect in that way because you learn more and more about yourself.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, pick up a copy. You want to hold your book up? How to be a master communicator.
Becoming a master communicator.
And what's the
subtitle? Yeah, the subtitle is Balancing New School Technology with Old School Simplicity.
Wow. I love that. Usually it's the subtitle that gets people.
Yeah.
Becoming a master communicator. Renée Marino, please pick up a copy. And you have a gift for our audience?
Yes.
Tell us what that is. Come on down.
Come on down, everybody. You can download for yourself. It's free. It's called What is Your Communication Home? And just as we just talked about, it allows you to identify your go-to communication style, which is a really strong starting point for you to develop self-awareness and understand why and how you communicate in the way you do.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are struggling to get into that leadership position and you want to be a manager and you're having trouble, it starts with communication. If you're in a relationship and you're fighting with your wife or you're fighting with your husband or whatever, your trigger points, that's part of your communication. They need to be healed and worked on. And Renée has plenty of strategies to help you with that. And I love how you say there's a natural way in which you communicate. That's your communication house.
Yes.
And so everybody has to kind of just get comfortable in that. You're not competing I've heard this sometimes with people like us. When we enter a room, the introverts feel like the spotlight is all on them, on that person, and they're sucking the life out of the room. And that's their perception of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to recognize when they're shutting down and give them a chance. That's hard for when you're singing the lead song in our own mind, but at the same time, we all need to learn all the communication styles. I train in disc communication. So when I enter a room, I can spot who the high D is, the dominator, the person who's gonna, and I'm a high I, but I have that D in me, very competitive sometimes. Mm-hmm. So we're going to shift gears on the show. I like to ask a lightning round of questions. All right. So our guests get to know you a little bit better. Number one, what is it about you that maybe we don't know about you?
I am an extroverted introvert. So I need my quiet time. As high energy as I am, as much as I get lit up by people, I must be around people. I also need that quiet time to recharge, to reflect, to refocus, and to get connected with myself.
I have this thing in me. I'm an only child, so I need time alone.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I've learned to like it. I enjoy it. When I hear people go to solitaire in prison and they come out crazy, I'm like, wait, meditate, think of things, great stuff in your head. So my second question, I know you talked about Clint Eastwood, but do you have a favorite memory?
Yes. With on set, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we were filming the breakup scene, and if you haven't seen the Jersey Boys film, check it out. Frankie and I are doing our big breakup scene. We filmed the scene once, and then Clint goes, all right, now I want you to really give it to him. So I'm like, okay. I get in character, and I start walking up the stairs, and I begin my lines. You show up for a couple of days, and you think that makes you a father. And all of a sudden, I start screaming because I forget all my lines. A few seconds later, I pick it back up. We finish the scene. Clint yells, cut, and then he goes, that was it. And I go, Clint, I forgot all my lines. He goes, I don't care. That was real, and that was raw, and that's good. When I was filming with Meryl, and in my head, I'm like, oh my God, he's talking to me about Meryl Streep. He goes, when I was filming with Meryl, she used to do 1,000,000 takes until she felt it was perfect. Until I filmed a rehearsal take and showed her how raw and organic it was, and she never did a ton of takes anymore. And that was the day that taught me about the gift of imperfection.
That's from the movie Bridges of Madison County, I believe.
Yep.
That was a phenomenal movie. I can just hear him talking to you. That was it, punk.
That was it. Oh, he's the best. The best.
You have to ask yourself one thing, punk. When I was 10, my dad would sneak me into a drive-in movie to watch The Enforcer.
Yeah.
I'm watching all this blood and gore at 10. It's funny. One last question. Who is your dream actor or actress you would love to work with?
Oof. Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, I would love to work with you too, Ray.
He is, I mean, first of all, he reminds me so much of my father when he was younger. So like in the Rocky movies, right? Like Rocky 3, Rocky 4, like my father, who I lost 3 years ago. He's my best friend. He reminds me so much of my father, but yes, I'm putting out into the universe that, I'm not pursuing acting anymore at this point, but I always say if an amazing role came out and it was just right for me, heck yeah, I'd do it. And, Sylvester Stallone has that new show, Tulsa King.
Yeah, I hear it's
manifesting. Great. I'm like, he's going to need a cousin or like a long lost daughter. That's going to be me. Yeah.
I missed you, Snookums. Yeah, that would be it.
Yeah.
You just have a walk-on part, and you have to sing and dance, of course.
Yes, of course.
That's awesome. I would love to get Clint Eastwood on the show, but I really would love, Christopher Walken, because I would love to have it.
Yeah, that's good.
Be like, you're listening to Awakened Nation. I used to get paid to imitate him, so on radio shows.
Yes,
So-
he was. Well, he was in the film with me, and
Yeah.
we had some great conversations the first time I met him. It's me, Clint Eastwood, and Christopher Walken, and Christopher Walken asking me all about Broadway, and I'm looking down. It's like I floated out of my body, and I'm looking down at myself, and I'm like, "What is my life right now?"
It's like a movie. It's
Yes,
like pinch
yes.
yourself. It's a dream.
Yes.
Renee, I suggest you get the tuna salad at the craft table. It's delicious. It's rare to get such a good tuna salad.
So good.
Renee, what was Broadway really like? Because back in the day, I'm an old hoofer. I like to dance, but you're the pro here at this table.
Oh my God, Brad, that is so good.
Wow. Renee, again, run into him on the street. Well, Renee, thank you. Everybody, please run out and get her book, Becoming a Master Communicator. Also, what was the giveaway again?
What is your communication home? So you can download that. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes.
Yes.
Download that for free and start to develop those other styles of communication. But before you do that, you got to identify what's most natural for you.
Powerful, powerful stuff. Renée Marino, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for being on Awakened Nation today. This was a powerful show. And I hope everybody took notes today.
Yes. Paper to pen.
There you go. Hey, everybody, tune in next week. We'll have another extraordinary guest here on season 5 of Awakened Nation. Take care, everybody, and reach out to Renee.
Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.